Hello everyone, Reza here. In this video, we will learn how to build a workflow to query data from a SharePoint list dynamically. User will simply define the query in natural language. The workflow will perform the filter query and the data will be exported to Excel. So let's check this video out in action. The concept of this video is to show how you can export data from a system of record, SharePoint, Dataverse, SQL, or Excel, apply a filter condition so you only export the data that you need for your scenario. We will take that filtered data set and post it to an Excel file. The scenario for the demo, I have a SharePoint list called Work Progress Tracker. Export data from this list based on a criteria. The criteria, the priority is critical. I have a total of 46 records where the priority is critical. To create the automation, I'll head over to Power Automate, make.powerautomate.com. Under Create, I can pick the trigger type for my workflow. I can trigger my automation based on an event that takes place, or based on a schedule that I define, or I can trigger it manually. I'll select this for the demo. I'll manually trigger the flow. I'll give my flow a name and click Create. The trigger is my manual trigger. Let's add an action to get items from my SharePoint list. So I'll use the SharePoint connector and the get items action. The site address for my SharePoint list. I'll select my SharePoint site. I'll select my SharePoint list. Show all. We have an option here to apply filter queries. Now these filter queries are an OData filter query. OData is a common protocol for filtering data from systems like SharePoint, Dataverse, SQL, and more. For SharePoint, these are the supported OData query options. Specific to filtering, we have comparison operators. You can check if the data starts with a particular text or contains a particular text, date and time-based filters, and more. Filter on the priority column, which in my case is a choice column. For performing OData filters, you need the internal name of the column. When I filtered on priority, in the URL, there is a query string parameter for the filter field, and the name is priority. I will copy this, go to Power Automate, and fire my query as priority space equals space in single quotes. I'll give my choice column value. I want priority critical. And right after this, we will write logic later to export this data to Excel. For now, I will add a compose action. For the input, write an expression length of dynamic content, get items action, the list of items that it gets from SharePoint after applying the filter. That's the array of data in dynamic content body value. I'll select this, click add. So the output of compose would be the number of items that it has retrieved from SharePoint. Let's save this flow. Let's test it out. Running this manually. Run the flow. The flow triggers, gets the filtered items from my SharePoint list, and compose. The output is 46 items in my SharePoint list that are critical. Items where the priority is critical and the progress is not equal to completed. So I have 7 such items. My progress column, first I need the internal name. I'll head back to my flow, edit my flow, get items, filter query, priority equals critical, space and progress not equal to, in single quotes, completed. Let's test this flow out. Running it manually once again. The flow triggers, gets the filtered items, items it returns, 7, get items, if we explore show raw outputs, the body value are the array of all those 7 items. Each array item includes all the column values from those specific records in my SharePoint list. This works well. The individual creating the flow needs to have knowledge of OData queries, needs to understand the syntax. One mistake and the filter query will fail. Plus, for different scenarios of filter queries, I'll have to create different flows. That's a lot of work. How about a single flow that can ask the user a simple question and the user in natural language simply describes what they would like to export? Let's try it out. The manually triggered action has an option where we can add an input. We'll select an input of type text. This is where we'll ask the user to describe what they would like to export from this work progress tracker list. I'll say, describe your scenario. This input the user is going to provide in natural language. How can I convert that to an OData query that my backend system understands? In this case, SharePoint. For that, I'll go and grab the schema of my SharePoint list. Even when I was manually framing the filter query, I had to look at the internal name of the column, the type of the column. Based on that, I have to frame my OData query. We will leverage the power of AI to frame those queries. And as an input to AI, we will provide the schema of the list. For that, we'll add an action, send an HTTP request to SharePoint from the SharePoint connector. My SharePoint site, I'll make a GET request against an endpoint, API web lists get by title. In single quotes, I'll put the title of my list. It's right here. I'll copy and plug this in, /fields. This will give me the schema. This action, I'll rename to get list schema. Let's first test this out. Now when I trigger the flow, it's going to ask me to describe a scenario. Right now I'm not handling that, so I'll just enter some sample data and run the flow. The HTTP request action, which I renamed to get list schema, show raw outputs. Here we have the entire schema of the list. Here is the information for the priority column. It includes the internal name that OData needs. It's a choice column, so it has choices. It also has the choice values that SharePoint expects. So I have the entire schema of the list. Back to the flow. Once I have the schema, next I'll run a prompt. This is an AI capability. Let's create a new custom prompt. Prompts run LLM models. At the time of recording of this video, GPT 4.1 mini is the default. You can pick other models of your choice. You can also pick models from Anthropic, or if you have custom models built in Azure AI Foundry, you can select them as well. Here I need to create instructions. Even the instructions, I can ask Copilot to help create for me. You are tasked with generating an OData filter query for SharePoint based on a given list schema definition. I'll submit. So I've given Copilot a prompt, and Copilot will transform that into instructions. I'll select Keep It. The instructions: analyze the provided list schema carefully, identify the fields, data types, any relevant metadata, understand filtering requirement conditions, construct a valid OData filter query. There are guidelines and more. This is completely customizable. Let me provide it with some inputs. SharePoint list schema definition. I would like to pass that dynamically from my flow to this prompt. For that, I can add content. I'll pick text. I'll call it schema. I'll close. Next, OData query to be performed. Once again, add content text. I'll call this query. The output, I'll delete what Copilot had generated here. I'll keep it very simple. Only provide the OData filter query as a plain text string as the response of this model. My flow, if I pick any of my previous flow runs, get list schema, show raw outputs, the body, I'll copy, switch back to the prompt, schema. Here I can provide some sample data for testing right here in the prompt experience itself. So I'll provide that. And query, this would be the natural language text that the user will enter on the flow. So let me try some scenarios right here. Priority is critical. I'll test. The model will go through the instructions, use the sample data that's provided since I'm testing, and check this out. Here is the OData filter query. Spot on. Priority, space, EQ, space, in single quotes, critical. Let's try another query. And progress is completed. Test. The model will help frame the OData filter query. Let's go back to the query. Priority is critical. Let's say I misspelled priority. I misspelled critical. Maybe I misspelled completed. User is entering text in natural language. Let's try it out. Because I'm providing the schema definition of my list, it understands the intent of the user. Which column? What are the supported values? It is still able to frame a valid filter query. Of course, there are going to be edge cases. For example, my query, show me all the tasks that are assigned to me. Assigned to is a person column. When I test this prompt, for person columns, the OData filter query has a particular syntax. It understands it's a person column based upon my schema. So it says assigned to /ID equals me. Now it doesn't understand the token me, but this is where I can give more instructions. Me is current user email. This I will pass as context to the prompt. Current user email. Sample data for now. I've entered an email address. Test. This time I updated my instructions. It has more context. There we go. See how smart it is. It understands it's an email address assigned to /email. Yes, this is the OData syntax. E caps, M caps, AIL lowercase equals the email in single quotes. Let's give it more inputs as well. And today's date is text. Today's date. I'll put in today's date. Let's update the query. Tasks assigned to me and are overdue. Natural language. Let's test it out. There's the query. And due date is as follows. Now it's trying to follow the standard OData syntax, but SharePoint is a little different. I'll give it one more instruction. For dates, use the format as follows, and it should be in single quotes. Now, it will frame the correct query. There we go. This prompt, I'll call it OData query generator. Click save. The prompt gets saved, and now it will take me back to the flow. The prompt is connected to the run a prompt action. I have to provide the input properties. The schema of my list, dynamic content, I'll pick body from get list schema. Query, dynamic content from my trigger, the scenario that the user is going to enter when they trigger the flow. Current user email, this from my trigger, see more, user email. And last, today's date, this I'll use the format date time expression. UTC now will give me the current date and time. Format it using this formatter. This gives the year, month, and day. Add, done. The output of the prompt, the text that it provides, will be the OData query that I will directly apply here using dynamic content. Run a prompt, text is that output. Now my flow becomes dynamic. Let's test it out. Tasks assigned to me where the priority is critical. There are 22 such tasks. To run the flow, I need to describe my scenario. My tasks that are critical. Remember, the user is going to provide their inputs in natural language. Let's run the flow. The flow triggers, gets the list schema, gives that context and more to the prompt. The prompt will do its magic. If we explore the outputs of prompt, here is the text, that's the query. Assigned to email is equal to Reza. It's perfect, that's my email. My query was my tasks that are critical. I never mentioned the column, but it's smart enough to know the choices. Priority has a critical choice option. So it picked that. Perfect. It fired the OData query, got the response, and here are those 22 rows. This is magic. This is pure AI magic. This flow I can share with multiple users. Each user can frame their own queries, and this makes the flow fully dynamic. The same concept is what I have expanded here to export the data to Excel right after I get the items. One thing to call out here, get items. Under settings, if your list is large, don't forget to turn on pagination. With premium licensing, you can go up to 100,000 rows of records that this action can return after performing the query. The data that it gets from get items, I want to put it in an Excel file. I have done multiple videos on this scenario, and one of the patterns that I highly recommend is using the Graph API because it can export large data in a matter of seconds. I'll link the video in the description for this video, so do check it out. I'll first create a file in OneDrive. It'll be an Excel file with no content. Then I'll create a table in that Excel file. I'll define the table range. A1 to E1 is the first row of the table. These are the column names that I would like to show in Excel. And this is the name of my table. Now, get items is going to get me all the column information from that SharePoint list. Here, I only want certain pieces of information. So I use a select data operation action. I get that array of data from get items, and I map and pick the column values that I want. Once I have this, I use the send an HTTP request action on the Office 365 users connector to fire the Graph API call that will point to the Excel file that I just created in OneDrive, point to that table that I created in Excel, and pass all the values. This will create the file. Once the file is loaded, a delay of a minute. Then I'll go and grab the content of the file and then send it out as an email to the user who triggers the flow. The email will include that Excel file. Now let's try running this flow. I'll click on Run, Query, Critical Tasks, Run. The work begins. Let's try another one. My tasks that are overdue and not completed. The flow triggers. If we explore these running flows, within seconds, the file is already there. There is a delay in the flow that I've introduced for a minute, because sometimes when you immediately fire the query to get the file content, you may not get the updated file content. It's the only reason for the delay. Once the flow completes, here is the email. Data export request from my work progress tracker list. This was my query. My tasks that are overdue and not completed. I can open the file. Here is my list of tasks. All these files getting stored in my OneDrive as well. This is where I mentioned, give me all the tasks where the priority is critical. And now, to take this a step further ahead, what if the user can define for which site, for which list, and what query do they want to perform? The pattern ahead is similar. Get the schema of the list, run the OData query, go get all the items, apply the filter query. Then I run another prompt here. This one is to set the data for the data export to Excel. And then the pattern is the same. Let's try this out. Here I have a list called product catalog in my IT site. Site URL, IT, list name, product catalog, quantity is less than 15. Run. The flow triggers, gets the schema of that list, goes frames the filter query. Here's the filter query. Available quantity is less than 15. Goes generates the file. And then it will be emailed out to me. And here is the email. Which site, which list, what was my query. And here is that exported data. If you enjoyed this video, then do like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And thank you so much for watching.